Some of the most influential Islamic scholars of India speaking the same voice, that of peace. At this conclave in northern India, religious thinkers and political leaders are passing a powerful resolution condemning all forms of violence in the name of Islam.
Jihad is commonly equated with terrorism, but in reality there is a world of difference between the two, and they have nothing in common.
Drawing cheers from those who've been victimized by this idea the most.
This gathering is significant for many reasons. The Deoband is a powerful Islamic school which has inspired tens of thousands of seminaries across the world, and some say even the Taliban have their ideological roots here. So this declaration that Islam doesn't support violence of any form has come as a strong message for those who still use religion as a justification for violent attacks.
500,000 Muslims who've come here from across the country have welcomed this resolution. The battle to fight stigma and prejudice for them is a daily one. And like Maulvi QASIMI, say their religion has been misinterpreted.
Islam loves peace. Islam has always called for peace. And we too want peace. We don't want terrorism or violence in this world. We don't support it and we don't want it.
But India has also earlier been a victim of extremist ideology. With this resolution, the Indian administration has called for other not-so-moderate groups to join this call.
I would urge that more voices be raised loudly and clearly against terrorism and all forms of violence.
But the issue here is not as simple as that. Splintering of religious groups has meant that varying opinions on groups such as the Taliban persist, some completely condemning them.
What is the connection between the Taliban and the Deoband school of thought? Nothing. This assumption that they are inspired by the Deoband is false. What they are fighting is their regional problem, local regional problem.
While others pointedly blaming foreign forces for using these groups for their own purposes.
Islam has always been a target of conspiracies. Look at Iraq, look at Afghanistan, and I would say also look at Pakistan. Look at all the violence and the bombings taking place in the country. The Taliban have denied it. Then who's doing it?
An answer for which may not be found here, but for millions of Muslims, these resolutions may just mark a new beginning. Prerna Suri, Al Jazeera, Deoband, Northern India.
Well, ZAID Hamid is a security analyst and author who's worked with the Pakistani government. He joins me live now from the capital, Islamabad. ZAID Hamid, India has vigorously denied allegations by Pakistan that it's funding the Taliban in South Waziristan. What's behind these charges? Why is Pakistan saying this now, do you think?
You see, nobody in Pakistan takes it seriously, this Indian rejection of these allegations, because when you find hundreds of kilograms of explosives, C4 plastic explosives, nitroglycerine, because there's no factory in Waziristan producing these. This is industrial level production explosives. And hundreds of kilos of them is being imported from Afghanistan into the tribal areas. The weapon systems have been found, communication equipment, laptop computers with satellite links, and the infinite supply of ammunition, weapons, rockets, and money. So there is definitely within the Pakistani establishment now, even within the government, initially which was at odds with the army to acknowledge this, but only yesterday we have seen Pakistan army and the government sitting together and accusing India very openly for the first time that they are involved in terrorism inside Pakistan and supporting the insurgency.
But let me ask you though, I mean, does India have problems of its own with extremist groups that could perhaps be exploited by the Taliban?
You see, there is absolutely no possibility. Number one is Taliban themselves are known to be Indian assets. The Afghan Taliban have always distanced themselves. The Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, Jalaluddin Haqqani and Mullah Umar have distanced themselves from Pakistani Taliban. Ideologically and from the theater of operations, Pakistani Taliban do not operate against the Americans or against the Indians. In fact, the Pakistani Taliban have threatened those jihadi groups which had their desire to fight against the Indians in the occupied Kashmir. And the Pakistani militant groups, which were banned during the Musharraf era, are now at war with the local Pakistani Taliban. So within the jihadi circle also, it is known very clearly that Taliban are an isolationist lot. They are anti-state, anti-Pakistan lot, and they are definitely not anti-India.
There is
only recently, because within Pakistan,
There is though, a school of thought that, that the Pakistani intelligence services, the ISI, perhaps is trying to discredit Hakimullah MEHSUD, the Pakistani Taliban leader, by saying he threatened to attack India. I mean, is there any merit in that, do you think?
Not at all, because the fact is that Pakistani military establishment is openly against Hakimullah MEHSUD and Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. The allegations that Pakistan Army or intelligence agencies may have sympathizers within Tehreek-e-Taliban is absolute rubbish. There may be, within Pakistani society, there are lots of segments which have sympathies with Afghan Taliban, with Hikmatyar, with Jalaluddin Haqqani, but definitely not with Tehreek-e-Taliban. And this Tehreek-e-Taliban, after their bombings in Peshawar, after their massive attacks against the civilian population, against schools, universities, girls, and just yesterday, 2 suicide bombings in Pakistan, they are now trying to regain the lost moral authority. Because the population, the public anger, for the first time, the tide has turned against the Taliban. They are getting the beaten in Swat Valley, they are getting the beaten in Waziristan, and they have lost the moral war also. So this statement from Taliban that they are going to attack India is only a desperate attempt to gain lost ground.
Okay, so, I mean, as you say, the Pakistani Taliban are having a tough time taking on the Pakistani army in South Waziristan. But, I mean, is it realistic, though, that they would be looking to attack India?
Not at all. Logistically, ideologically, it's absolutely not possible. They have no access, they have no resource. How can they attack India based in Afghanistan? How can they attack India based in the remote mountains of South Waziristan, especially when they are being chased and hunted by Pakistan Army, and especially when the Pakistan Army itself are saying that they are the biggest Indian asset, biggest insurgent group created in Pakistan by the Indians in the last 30 years.